Hello all, Xyceres here. I have been playing this game called Abomi Nation. It is a roguelike creature collection game, and I wanted to put out some tips for new players because roguelike games can be difficult, and this is not super difficult as far as roguelikes go, but still a little bit. And I thought, while the game explains itself fairly well, some extra tips would be helpful if someone gets stuck. So that's what this video is. So you'll be in the background, you'll be seeing some gameplay of it. If you are interested in the game, there'll be a link to the Steam store page for it in the description, as well as the community Discord. But anyway, I'm just going to get right into it with the first tip. So tip number one, in this game there is a concept of the Abomi archive, where it's like a Pokédex, but it has a lot more information than the Pokédex does in the Pokemon games. So you can see like base stats, whether they float, what the abilities do of every creature you've encountered, whether it's one you've had in this run or a previous run, have spoken to in a town, or fought before. So there's quite a lot of information in there, particularly the base stats and the typing weaknesses. If you're not particularly familiar with the type chart, and the abilities are very useful to know at all times. And roguelikes very much come down to information. Being able to make an informed decision on what you should do is a very powerful thing, and the archive, you have access to it at almost all points in the game. The only time you can't access it is when choosing a starter. So just use it. Use it all the time. Like you see a creature that you know you've seen before, but you don't remember what it does, just look it up in the archive. See it got a creature on the field and you just like, what is it weak to? Look it up in the archive. There's a lot of power to being able to use that, and I would really recommend you use it as much as possible, particularly when you're starting out and don't recognize the creatures quite as much, the Abomi quite as much. The second tip, tip number two, there are a bunch of items hidden on the map. So the ones you see by default, they're marked with stars, they're little piles on the ground. That's the one that the game tells you are there. But there's also each zone you go to has an item hidden in a tree. So there'll be a bunch of trees around the map and you can shake them. One of those trees will drop an item once, and you can pick up that item, and it's normally just like a recovery item, a food item, but occasionally you'll get holdable items and other things. And just increasing your amount of items is good in that respect. Other than that, there's also the towns have items. If you look at your mini map and see an icon that isn't an eye, it's probably an item that you can grab from an NPC in the town. And the last thing that comes up is the creatures that you can train with. Occasionally, it's not guaranteed on every map as far as I've seen, but occasionally you'll notice that like a particular species is always on that map. So you go into a fight, it's there beforehand, it's there after. You do that like once or twice, and you notice it just always there. That one is there. The reason it's always coming up is because it's the one that has an item. It can give you one item one time if you go and fight it in the training battle. And those items can be very good because you can get tablets and holdable items from them fairly easily, and it's a really good way to increase your options that you have in a particular run. Now, you don't have to wait for like multiple battles and keep an eye on it. You can just go and fight every training thing, but if you do notice something sticking around, I would definitely go fight it, even if you weren't planning on a training in that zone. That's all the items that are hidden as far as I'm aware. Everything else you should be able to spot fairly easily, like the radishes and the star icons, where you just walk up and press A on them. The next thing I want to talk about is tablets, because I just mentioned them. So that's tip number three is tablet. It's about tablets. These are very powerful items. They're generally worth picking up if you can. Sometimes the store ones, because they are kind of expensive in the store, you might not want to pick up all of them. But if you see a particularly powerful move, you might want to pick that one up. The reason for this is tablets teach the move of the tablet to every single one of your Abomi, either current or future. So as soon as you get an Abomi, if it learns the move, it will learn it through the tablet. And there are some moves that certain Abomis can only learn from tablets, so that it's not in their level up list, but they can still learn it from a tablet. But if it's in their level up list, they will learn it from a tablet if you have the appropriate tablet. So it either speeds it up if it's level based or gives you access to a move you wouldn't normally have. And most of them are pretty good. Like you might find some for some really bad moves, like in the mid to late game, and maybe they're not worth picking up, but it's probably worth trying to pick them up as much as possible in the early game, particularly when you don't really understand what moves are what yet, just because it might give you a powerful move that onto a creature that you actually need it on, or even just like a different option that you need on that one. I've had a few times where I've got like I had a special attacker that needed a special move and only was learning physical, and a tablet fixed that up for me. The next tip number 4, HP. HP matters the most. HP shouldn't be that hard to see why. It's a permadeath game. If your HP hits 0, that creature is dead. You're not getting it back. With some exceptions, the training battles can't kill your Abomi. The reason I bring this up is because while you do heal 20% per battle, so you can use that to keep your HP up, 20% HP and 20% mana back per battle. It also means that apples, which heal HP, a food item that can either be placed on an Abomi and used automatically or used manually from the menus, they're both they're really important. I normally try to buy up most of the apples at any of the stores because they're guaranteed in each store in each town. But it's just you want to be careful with them. Like you don't want to be wasting apples in training fights because you can't die in a training fight, so don't waste apples in it. You can always go back to town to heal. In fact, it's very easy to go back to town to heal because you can fast travel to towns at all times just by clicking on the map and then scrolling to the town and pressing the A button or X button if you're using a PlayStation controller. But yeah, your HP is super important. You want to stock up on apples because of that. And you do heal between battles, so you can use that as well for your healing if you want to like cycle your Abomi. But if you have a balanced team, you may not be able to cycle too much because you'll run out of ones that are strong against things and start using things that are weak against it, and you'll just be taking more damage, and it's probably not worth it at that point. Anyway, yeah, so HP very important, thus apples very important. Tip number 5 is about status immunity. So with status, each element, except for neutral, has a status associated with it. Abomi of that element are immune to that status, and they all have different effects. So the air element is immune to dizzied. That status lowers defense, gives you a 50% chance of choosing a random move from your entire list of known moves. It won't even just be the ones that you have chosen as your 4 usable in battle. It can sometimes pick things that you don't even have ready. And it's cured after 2 to 5 turns. Earth Abomi are immune to dirty, which applies a minus speed debuff and gives a 25% chance to miss, and lightning damage dealt is reduced by 50%, and it's cured if you're hit by water. Electric Abomi are immune to shock, which is a 25% chance to just not do anything. Doesn't lower any stats. Water attacks have 25% recoil, and it's cured by being hit by an earth move. Fire types are immune to burn. That provides a minus attack debuff, and just does 10% of max HP per turn. It's cured if they're hit with a water move. Ice types are immune to freeze. That gives a minus special attack debuff. Has a 25% chance of the Abomi taking no action, and is cured if they are hit with a fire move. Plant types are immune to poison, which has a minus special defense debuff on it, and does a 10% HP per turn, similar to burn, and is cured only by items. And water types are immune to soak, which has no debuff to stats, but applies 2 times damage from electric damage taken, and your fire type attacks deal 50% less damage, and it's cured after 2 to 5 turns. Probably the most important one here is, I would say, the air and plant immunities, because they are immune to defensive debuffs, so they're really good on tanks, although if you're a special attacker and have an ice type, the being immune to special attack debuff, or the physical attacker and the fire type, so you're immune to burn, those can also be quite useful because stat debuffs are quite powerful, because the first level is going to reduce or increase damage, whatever's appropriate for the whatever is appropriate for the direction it's moving, by about 50%. Because what happens is by default you're at 100% because you're at 2 on 2 with no stages. If you go above, if you go in the positive direction, so +1 stage to +6 stage, you increase the numerator, so the number at the top. So if I get +1 stage, it'll be 3 on 2, which is 150%. We would say it was on attack, so 150% damage. And then if I go up another stage, it'll go up to 4 on 2, which is 200%, etc. You basically just get 50% extra damage each time, but it's 50% of what your base damage would have been. And if you're going into the negative direction, it goes 66, 50. I can't be bothered working out. 40. It's 40 actually. It's not that hard. It's 2 on 5. 2 on 6 is 33%. 2 on 7 is 28%. And then it caps out at 2 on 8, which is 25%. So those can matter quite a lot, particularly if you get them particularly high or low, but even just like one stage can make a really big difference. Maybe turn a one shot into a two shot, or vice versa. The next tip is the evolution requirements. Evolution is quite weird in this game. You don't just hit a level and evolve, you actually need to meet certain requirements, and it's different for each Abomi. If you go into the party menu, you can actually check the evolution requirements. They're on the bumper, but the left bumper if you're using a controller, or L1 if you're using a PlayStation controller. They are shown there. That normally the first one will be a level requirement, and then there'll be some other requirements for what the Abomi has to have done. Once you meet them, you have to be in battle and use an item called an evolution crystal in order to evolve. But the more important thing is, when you get into the game at the start, you might want to go check what your starter at very least evolves by, just in case it's something that's difficult and you might want to focus on it. I know that some of the permanent pluses to stats can be something you actually have to plan for, and there are some Abomi that require those for evolutions. And the last tip I want to talk about is just the temporal store. So there's this concept of a meta progression where you get more unlocks. It won't affect an individual run, but it'll affect your future runs. So you can get more items and more variants of bommies and locations, etc., that you can add into the randomizer for future runs. To get them, you need to get the temporal stones, which you get from finishing runs. If you finish a run, you get stones based off of how many bosses you beat, what difficulty you're playing at. It gets halved if you turn off permadeath. I don't like turning off permadeath partially because of that, but partially just because I think it makes the game more enjoyable to not have it be a guaranteed win. So you've got you get more temple stones for beating bosses, finishing the game further. You can get a few more by beating the temporal cave that turns up later in the game, and the unlocks are unlocked by playing the game more as well. So like you can't actually unlock everything to begin with. You can unlock all the variants, the environments, and some of the items, but there are some extra ones, specifically There's a lot of extra ones. There's one for each Abomi line that's in the game, and you actually need to fight that Abomi as a boss and beat it before that item unlocks for purchase. So that's how the Temporal store works. So you just need to fight one of each, fight the appropriate species line. It doesn't have to be like the end of the species or anything. It's not one for each Abomi, it's one for each Abomi line. So just fight one of them as a boss. It unlocks, you throw your stones into it, and then that will unlock for future runs. So it's not going to have any effect on the current run unless you count cosmetic effects, because the chromatic orbs and the grayscale orbs, I can't remember what they're called. They can be used on current runs, but all they do is change colors of your Abomi if you want to make things look pretty. But that's the Temporal store, and I think that's just something interesting to understand. You don't need to basically that you don't need to worry about it just now. If you're having trouble winning, you're still progressing in the Temporal store. You're still getting the stones every time you beat a boss, and you're still getting those unlocks for future when you will probably, once you get the hang of the game, I feel like you'll probably just be drowning in stones because they seem to give them out at a higher rate than they require them from what I've seen, which makes a little bit of sense. But this should be all my tips for new players. Hopefully this has helped. If it has, good. I'll probably be doing at least one stream of this game, probably as a live stream on Twitch, and then port it over to YouTube. But just as an FYI, this game exists. It's fun. I quite enjoy it, and um, I hope these tips have helped. Okay, bye.